So this morning we're going to talk about the 10 Menorot of Shlomo Hamelech. It turns out that the title already gives it away. Shlomo Hamelech, for some reason, put into the Beit HaMikdash that he built, that we have learned about extensively, as something that was a template given to him according to our tradition by his father. There's a pasuk in Sefer Divrei Hayamim that hints to this. We have Gemaras that make mention of this explicitly as well. And I want to see a few sources on the screen, beginning with the section that we're going to see in the Tanakh today is the section that is read on Chanuka, but not every Chanuka, and not actually this year, but on many years, or not many, some years, I shouldn't say many years, we do read this section that we're going to see today inside in the Tanakh. So if you look with me on the screen, we'll learn a little bit, a few of the sources inside, and then we'll see inside Tanakh. Again, you need a Tanakh to participate. If you don't have a Tanakh in your home, or you don't have a good one, you can't access it, go online to any of the online Tanachim, Sefaria.org, Chabad has Tanakh, alhatorah.org, hatanach.com. The list goes on and on. Most of those have English translation. So this is the Gemara in Megillah, and it tells us what we're going to read at various holidays, the various Kriyat HaTorah, but also here it tells you what the Haftorah is going to be. All translations courtesy of Cincino, open source. So here we see the different Haftorahs, and when we come to the period of Chanukah, it's down at the bottom of this Gemara, but Chanukah b'Nisiyim u'maftirin Zechariah b'Nerot de Zechariah. So that's what we read. We read a section from the book of Zechariah. In fact, on Shabbat Chanukah every year, we read at least the Haftorah of from the Sefer Zechariah. It features the menorah quite prominently. We're going to look at that. We'll see it inside. A single menorah. V'im mikloi shtei Shabbatot. If it so happens that there are two Shabbatot of Chanukah, I think it was that way last year, maybe 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. It's when it starts on a Friday night. So then 8 days later is again Friday night, Shabbat, and the 8th day again Shabbat. So Kamaita b'Nerot de Zechariah, the first Shabbat we'll read about the lights, the candles, the lamps of Zechariah. Betraita, the latter one, we read from Melachim Alef Menorot Shlomo, and that's what we're going to focus on today. But I give you a whole arichas, a whole long Gemara over here. I need 3 lines. I could have economized. I wanted you to see a whole section of different holidays and the way in which the Haftorahs are lined up with the Kriyat HaTorah each time. The Haftorah has to be of the theme of the Kriyat HaTorah. So that's not a surprise generally. But if you look at the beginning of this Gemara, it mentions what happens on Sukkot. B'yom tov harishin shel chag, koren b'parshat mo'adot, shebetorat kohanim. On the holiday of Sukkot, the first day, we read the section of the festivals in Torat Kohanim in Parshat Emor in chapter 23 of Sefer Vayikra. Maftirin, where's the Haftorah from? Sefer Zechariah, Hinei Yom Ba LaHashem, and the Haftorah from the book of Zechariah. Va'idna now di'ikatre yomi, now that we have 2 days of Sukkot, i.e. in the diaspora. L'macha mikra hachinami karina, we read the same Kriyat HaTorah the second day. Afturi maya mafturin, what's the Haftorah on the second day? The answer is from the book of Melachim Alef, the section of Shlomo HaMelech, Vayikalu el HaMelech Shlomo. Right? You're going to connect it specifically to the book of Melachim Alef, to the inauguration of the Mikdash in Yerushalayim. Then the rest of the days we read on Chol HaMoed about the Korbanot HaChag, and on the last day of Sukkot, what do we read? We read Kol HaBechor, the section from Parshat Re'eh. What's the Haftorah? Again from Sefer Melachim Aleph, Perek Tet now, about the end of the inauguration of the Mikdash. Vayikichlot Shlomo. We're going to focus today on chapter 7, which is the section known as Menorot Shlomo, being described here if there are 2 Shabbatot of Chanukah, and it stands to reason why that would be. I'm just pointing out that on Sukkot, it's also the same pattern, Zechariah and then Melachim, and that's what we have here, Zechariah and then Melachim. Coincidence? Certainly not. The two holidays are, of course, related to each other in various ways. That's a separate shiur in and of itself, but very easy, low-hanging fruit. They're the two festivals that actually have baked in from the Torah, from the Torah in the case of Sukkot, 8 days. And then Chanuka, 8 days. There are a lot of parallels, it's a separate shiur. I gave it maybe 10 years ago, 11 years ago, something like that. So just for consideration, those Zechariah and Melachim Alef. Shelley, go ahead. I saw you raise your hand, but I didn't hear what you said.
Yes. Okay, I'm wondering, it's Zechariah and it's Melachim Alef when there's two Hanukkahs, but if there's only one, it's just Zechariah. Yes. Why is Zechariah considered more important or more relevant than Melachim Alef?
This is our question.
Oh.
That's it. That's the question. It's this is a question. It's a question Rav Moshe Lichtenstein asks. I'm going to tell you what he says about this shortly. We're getting there, but that is a question. I would have thought you start with Melachim Alef, and the easy answer is, well, Sukkot is Zechariah, and then Melachim Alef takes a back seat. So Zechariah, Melachim Alef. But why? But shouldn't it be the opposite? Should it be? But it isn't. Why not? Okay, so I have to get there. So in fact, the first thing we need to do is, and the answer might be, if we look up the book of Zechariah, so take your Tanakh, Zechariah chapter 2, we're going to be reading this stuff Torah. We're not learning the whole thing through. We don't have time. I'm showing you some highlights. The Navi Zechariah lives at the end of the period of Nevuah. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, 3 Nevi'im, who are at the end, chronologically, of Nevuah. Zechariah is living already in the time period of essentially the Persian Empire. He gets various Nevuot at different times, different communications, if you will, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, different things that are clearly of things that are going to happen in Beit Sheni in the Second Temple period. That might be right there a hint. It's about the Second Temple period, and the Second Temple period is when the holiday of Chanukah happens. So it seems like you could say maybe an easy answer. I'm on the Koren Tanakh, for those who are using Hebrew English Koren Tanakh that we use normally in Shul, page 713. It's again Zechariah chapter 2, verse 14. And this section is a nevuah about the future, about the streaming of all nations going in to be in Yerushalayim, to be connected to Hashem, right? Everyone's going to be coming there, etc. And the Jewish people, Yehuda, will be again an Admat Kodesh. Yerushalayim is back. And then in the middle of it comes a vision, chapter 3 of the Kohen Gadol. And this Kohen Gadol is, it's a vision shown to Zechariah of a Kohen Gadol named Yehoshua. And he's in front of the Malach Hashem. And there's the Satan there standing on the right side. And he's prosecuting. It's imagery. It's prophetic imagery. Right, so pasuk bet, gimel bet, vayomer Hashem el Satan, yigar Hashem b'cha Satan, yigar Hashem b'cha b'cha b'Yerushalayim, halo ze ud mutzal me'esh. So God Himself, as it were, upbraids the Satan and says, "What are you doing? What gives you the right? You know, you of course you can't. You know, I chose Yerushalayim. You see, is Yehoshua Kohen Gadol? You know what he is? He's an ud mutzal me'esh." He's the brand pulled out of the raging fire, the Ud Mutzal Me'esh. That's what he is. But look at how Yehoshua looks. Yehoshua ya lavush begadim tsoim v'omed lifnei malach. Yehoshua, the Kohen Gadol, for whom there is a sanction against having any blemish or dirt, rather, or stain on his clothing. His clothing are filled with tsoah, could be mud, could be excrement, could be dirt of some other kind. And that's how the conversation is going. Of course, the notion here that he's going to get a purified, cleaned garment is bound up with the notion of purification or repurification. And since he already exists as the Kohen Hagadol, therefore we're talking about something related maybe to, right, needing to rededicate himself and rededicate that which is around him, right, and all of the elements connected to the Mikdash. And as we keep going, get to chapter 4, and that's where the bells start ringing, because it's pretty obvious in the Haftorah itself, we learn about the golden menorah. Chapter 4. Veshav hamalach hadover bi vayireni ki ish shei or mishnato. Comes wakes me up. Vayomer Eli ma ta ro'eh. Va'omar va'iti v'hinei monorat zahav kula v'gula al roshab shiv'a neiroter alea shiv'a v'shiva mutzakot laneirot asher al rosha. The whole description follows about the olives, the way this golden menorah looks. It's very beautiful looking. It's ornate, and it has the oil being fed into it. And there's olive branches on the sides. The seal of Medinat Yisrael looks that way. It's not accidental. It's right from this Haftorah. And of course, here is the description that is given, right? That it's lo b'chayv lo b'koch ki im beruchi amar Hashem tzvakot, right? This is the vision of what's going to happen, and that's what's shown to here in the vision to Zechariah, and these are the things that he sees. Shelly, you want to say something? Sorry, go ahead. Unmute. I don't hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I remember when we learned in Ezra and Nehemiah way back how a lot of the people were crying with the dedication of the second Beit HaMikdash because they remembered the first one, and how certain commentators said that was why it wasn't successful. So is that dirty clothes would equal sins, which would either equal his personal sins or the sins, as he is a Kohen Gadol, the sins of the country. So excellent. Is it because they did not rejoice in the second temple that this happens?
Well, some of the commentators said it had to do with not rejoicing, but the pshat is just the level of pshat, very obviously in that description, is that people were crying because they remember what the old one looked like, how majestic it was, and how pathetic this one was in comparison. Now, later on, it would be expanded and refurbished by, of all things, Herod, by Hordus. But that comes much, much later, hundreds of years later. In and around the year 516 BCE, the dedication of Beit Sheni, it's not so that they're crying, and that's the problem. It might be they couldn't help themselves. Now, it ended up being a problem. Why didn't they celebrate more when they realized, to celebrate what they had? But you're definitely onto something. The second temple is, in certain ways, a shadow of what the previous Mikdash was. And people,
but Rabbi, isn't that somewhat our fault? Most people stayed in Bavel or in Persia. So, but if we'd all gone back there,
maybe it would have been different and better. Yeah. Agreed. But that's the story. That's what happens. And when you look at this and say for Zechariah, you see for yourself, so things aren't in the second temple period, they're not so amazing. And yet there's a vision of cleansing or of fixing or of something of that nature that's going on. And the menorah features very prominently for that, right? Shelley, you still have your hand up. Did you want to say something again? No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get rid of that. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just put the hand down. Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking you if you want to speak. Okay, so let's go to Sefer Melachim Alef. We have this question. Well, okay, so give me the ideal, right? We have to see what's going on in Melachim Alef. Turn to page 400 and should be 411. On page 411, for those who you come every week, so we're learning chapter by chapter, line by line. I'm skipping a whole chunk of chapter 7, verse 1 through verse 12. I'm doing that on purpose. We'll come back to it. I want to focus on verse 13. I'm not going to see all the interstitial tissue over here, but just look at verse 13, Pasuk Yud Gimel, page 411, again on Kings, chapter 7, verse 13. Vayishlach Hamelech Shlomo vayikach et Chiram mitzor, ben isha almanahu mimatei Naftali v'aviv ish tzori, choresh nechoshet, vaymalei et hachochma, bet hatavuna, bet hadat lasot kol melacha b'nechoshet, vayavo Hamelech Shlomo vayas et kol melachto. This is the description of Shlomo Hamelech bringing someone from Tzor. Tzor is today approximately where Tyre is, in Lebanon. There are actually two Tyres, just so you know. One of them is along the coast. The other one is a small island that was a separate kingdom. So that's going to be relevant now because Shlomo brings someone from Tzor. His name is Hiram. And that person is described to us as the son of a widow. And he is from the tribe of Naphtali. His father is from Tyre, is from Tzor, and works with brass. And Hashem has infused this individual with wisdom, understanding, intelligence to do all of the work that he has to do with the bronze work. He's coming to the king Shlomo, and he does all of the malacha, all of the work. You will recall that the name Hiram, which presumably is a popular name in antiquity in this period of time, is already known to us since we already had the story of another person named Hiram, the king himself. And that's if you turn back to page 408. Page 408. Page 408, chapter 5, verse 15. And it describes how Hiram, the king of Tzor, Vayishlach Hiram melech Tzor et avadav el Shlomo ki shama ki oto mashchul melech tachan avihu ki ohev haya Hiram David kol hayamim. So here is Hiram, the king of Tzor. Is that the same person? It doesn't seem like it could be the same person for various reasons. This is Hiram melech Tzor, and this is Hiram from Tzor, right? How do they have the same name? How could there be two people named Ken in the world today? Could be two people named Shelly or Debbie or Ronnie or Benny, because there's people named that. Yeah, could be. The Dot Mikra just allows for that possibility from Mosada Rav Kook, but we should just understand it a little bit, against the backdrop of what's going on. Certainly, there's some kind of import for whatever's going to happen in Bayit Rishon, the first Beit HaMikdash. Is something that's being imported. By the by, Hiram Melech Tzor, back in chapter 5, with the descriptions of what he's going to send in terms of the wood, etc. All of the elements that he's going to be bringing remind us that of the power of Shlomo HaMelech, and also of the international relations that Shlomo has. Other people want to be with him, and he can bring people from afar to be engaged with him in the task of building the Mikdash Hashem. If you turn to Sefer Divrei Hayamim, all the way at the end. We're in Divrei Hayamim Bet, right? Divrei Hayamim Bet. We find out Divrei Hayamim Bet, chapter 2. We have here the letter that Shlomo sent to Huram Melech Tzor, a cognate of the name Hiram, and he tells him, as you did for my father, do for me as well. And the beginning of the story in Divrei Hayamim Bet, another version of the same. We talked already. I don't want to go back there again, but we discussed this idea of the way in which Divrei Hayamim Bet gives us another perspective on how to understand what's going on in the book of Melachim. So if you look in Melachim, in Divrei Hayamim rather, Bet, chapter 6, you keep fast forwarding all of the elements that were brought and created and made, etc. Right? We have a description of different elements made, in fact, by different sources. In one case, Huram makes something, and Huram or Hiram, etc. But if you look at chapter 6, chapter 2, I'm sorry, I went too far. Sorry, chapter 2, verse, I'm sorry, I'm making these flip so much. Chapter 2, verse 6. Yeah, look at page 986 in the Koren Tanakh, 986. Again, I'm in Chronicles 2, chapter 2, verse 6. Sorry, in the original letter, I knew I'd missed it. In the original letter that Shlomo sends to Huram Melech Tzor, he says, Ve'ata, now, shlach li ish chacham, lasot bazahav, v'kesef v'nechosh v'barzel, v'argavan, v'charmil, utchilet, v'yodel, lefatech pituchim, im ha'chachamim asher imi b'Yehuda v'Yerushalayim, asher yichin David avi. Send me a wise person. I want someone who knows how to work with these kinds of metals and substances and the like. So verse 12, verse 13, Ve'ata, and now shalachti, this is the response of Huram Melech Tzor, shalachti ish chacham yodea bina lechuram avi, Ben Isha min benot Dan, Aviv ish tzori. Yodel asur b'zahav v'chesef, b'nechosh u'vabarzel, b'avnim u'vayitzim, u'vagaman, b'agaman, b'tchel u'vabutz, v'charmil, v'tech pituach, v'lachshov makom ha'chashavet, asher yinatein lo im chachamecha, v'chachme Adoni David avicha. They're all going to work together. The chachamim you have, and I'm sending you my best guy, right? So, in Sefer Melachim Alef, it does describe that he's a choresh. He's a craftsman. But Rashi already points out that the expression chachma, tvuna, and dat are the three elements through which the world was created. Shlosha, klei, umanut, she'olam nivra bahen. These are the three tools, the three instruments by which Hashem created the world, as Mishlei itself describes, right? B'chachma yasad aretz, konen shemai b'tvuna, b'da'atot amot nivkeu. And these are the three in the building of the house for Hashem, the Beit Mikdash. Many midrashim that go in this direction, that the Mikdash is a microcosm, symbolic microcosm, obviously, of the universe. It is representation of different elements. And this expression, v'yimale, the idea of the chachma, the tvuna, and the dat, of course, has cadences, as Dat Mikra points out, to Betzalel, Ben Uri, Ben Hur, Lamatei Yehuda, also where we know his tribe, etc. So it's interesting from the Torah, from the building of the Mishkan. There's some parallels there as well. The Radak points out that we have the source here. It mentions Matei Naphtali. He's from the tribe of Naphtali. That's so right. The Radak tells us who have Matei Naphtali. Ve'imo mibnot Dan. Kemo she'amar b'divrei hayamim. Ben Isha almana mibnot Dan. All right. So his father, he's from the tribe of Naphtali, and his mother is from the tribe of Dan. You'll ask me, well, why didn't it say both in one place or the other? Lo barur, lo yodea. It says his
father's from Tyr. In Divrei Hayamim, it doesn't say his father is from Naphtali. It says his father is from Tyr, which could let you to think that his father wasn't Jewish.
Yeah, so that is a possibility. But as I'm about to say, the next sentence from the Radak, he thinks it means Umasha Amar v'aviv ish tzori sheyagar betzor. He lived there. He was a resident in Tzor. Kimo oved Edom hagiti ki Levi haya ulefi shegar begat karu karao giti vitzori kriato milura vitzori. Sorry, yeah, vitzori. He lives there, not milael but milara. So he lives there. That's what he does. He dwells there. Mitzudat David mimatei Naphtali aviv haya mibnei Naphtali v'imo eta mibnot Dan. And what is Itzori? I think there's a typo. Can't be Hach Gorer. Hit Gorer. Zman Rav. Bitzori. He lived there a long time. They called him that. He was a Chicagoan. Lahavdol. He was at Tzori. Wasn't his religion. But I don't discount the possibility, Shelley, as you're pointing out. It could be there's a hint here. Maybe he wasn't Jewish. But then we have to reconcile why it says he's Mimatei Naphtali and also his mother is Mibnot Dan. So he's from the tribe of Naphtali. He's from the tribe of Dan. Something's not adding up. And Naphtali and Dan, by the way, both north. So it makes sense then that people migrated farther north. The Dat Mikra, again, from Osada of Kook, I was reliant on them a lot for the Shir, clearly, point out that city of Tzor, which is along the coast in Lebanon, is controlled by, at that time, almost certainly, by elements of Shevet Asher. So how did a person from another tribe get there? He went there, he lived there. And the fact that the two were sort of across the waterway meant that the Tyrian king had influence. Remember, nobody has hermetically sealed borders, right? So it's not like it's not as if that people are living on one side of the map and on the other side of the map, and there's like a line between them. In davar kazeh, right? So you have to realize what it means. That there was a ship that went back and forth, that there were people who were connected, that were right. So just worthy of consideration, when we think about the relationship between Jews and non-Jews, and what it means that you have borders and you have a whatever you want to call it, some kind of a international relationships, trade and whatnot. Okay. All right. So, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I'm not entirely sure if the tire of today is actually tzor of the Bible. I'm actually not sure if that's the case. So don't hold me to that. But sometimes places were renamed in the vicinity, even if they weren't necessarily exactly in the same location. They were like close by, best you could do, So it is what it is. Let's move on. The point is, in the first temple period, Shlomo Melech has a relationship with Hiram. He can tell him what to do or make requests from him. There's trade. He can summon someone else, and that's this person, not Hiram Melech Tzor, but Hiram, who is a descendant of one tribe, two tribes. I mean, he's part of only one tribe. It goes according to the side of his father. So he's Matei Naphtali, according to the Mefarshim. Whatever it is, right? We're still getting a flavor of a time that is totally different than the time of Zechariah. Zechariah lives at a time where the best case scenario was they could get a mikdash, but they were not going to be getting independence. There was no such thing as telling anybody what to do. There were no treaties. They were only there at the benevolence of and the behest of the Persian Empire. No one was lending them a hand. So when you think about it, you realize, well, that's already a flavor of a difference between Bayit Rishon and Bayit Sheni, right? Is this Haftorah that we're reading meant to hark us back to some halcyon image of the ideal? Or is it first and foremost telling us, remember there was a nevuah of Zechariah? Guess what? Later on, there was an actual holiday where the menorah featured very prominently. Okay. Now, if we look up the story now, staying in Melachim Alef, let's go to the next slide, if you will. You look up in your Tanakh, the next section of Melachim Alef, chapter 7. This is what we read as the Haftorah. The Haftorah goes from Pasuk Mem, page 413, and that's why I gave you the whole excursus about Hiram, because the first line here on page 413, Tanakh, again, Book of Kings, number 1, chapter 7, verse 40. And the Haftorah is verses 40 through verse 50. Vayas Hiram et hakirot v'yaim v'mizrakot v'yichal Hiram lasot kol melacha asher asa lamelech Shlomo beit Hashem. It tells you that he made the lavers and all of the different elements related, right? The shovels that were going to be needed, the basin, everything that was the bronze work. There's another discussion I actually am skipping for want of time. Who did the bronze work? Who did the gold and silver in the end? But let's take it. Hiram was very much involved. That's the point. Amudim shtayim v'gulot hakotarot asher arosh amudim shtayim v'has vachot shtayim chasod shtei gulot hakotarot asher arosh amudim. These are like these massive pillars and the ornate decorations on the top of them. V'harimonim arba meot l'shnei hasvachot shnei turim rimonim lasvacha ha'echat. There's these layers of these. They look like they're made out of, like, look like pomegranates. Right, they're on different layers. Lechasor shtei gulot hakotarot asher al pnei amudim v'mechonot aser v'kirot asara al mechonot v'hayam ha'echad v'bakar shnei masar tachar hayam. I'm skipping this pasuk. Don't jump up. We're going to come back to what this is and what it's doing here. Not for today. I'm focusing, getting to the menorah. V'atasirot v'yaim v'mizrakot v'kol hakilim ha'ele asher asa Hiram lamelech Shlomo beit Hashem nechosh murad. Here are all the different things that were made out of bronze and that were made by Hiram for King Shlomo. Bekikar Yarden Yitzakam Hamelech b'ma'avei ha'adama bein Sukkot vein Sartan. That was just in the Parsha last week where it mentioned the place of Sukkot. So it's on the east bank of the Jordan. And that seems to be the area where they poured these molds and made them, and they brought them from there. Vayanach Shlomo et kol hakilim merov me'od lo nechkar mishkal nechoshet. There's no way to quantify how much copper was being used. We simply don't know. Then we learn. Here we are, verse 48. Vayas Shlomo et kol hakelim asher beit Hashem et mizbach hazahav vet hashulchan asher alav lechem apanim zahav. So based on Melachim Aleph, what does it say? He made all of the kelim. He made the shulchan within it, and then we're going to put the showbreads on it. And then pasuk memtet vet hamenorot chamesh miyamin v'chamesh mismol. The menorahs, 5 to the right, 5 to the left. Lifnei hadvir zahav sagur. It was in front of the Devir, again, the Kodesh HaKodashim, or the entry of the Kodesh HaKodashim. It was made out of very fine, pure gold. Ve'aperach, ve'anerot, ve'amelkachayim zahav. So the different elements that were used for it, that were, first of all, on it, the flowers of decoration, the lamps, the tongs, everything was made of gold. V'hasipot, ve'hamizamrot, V'hamizrakot, v'akapot, v'amachtot zahav, sagur, v'apotot, l'dlatot, l'daltot, abayit, apnimi, l'kodesh kodashim, l'dalte, abayit, l'hechal zahav. Everything was made with this gold, and it tells you, all of these different things having to do with the menorah, and then also even the hinges, the hinge work, and the doors that are on the inside. We saw that last time. That are these ceremonial doors that were left open. That were, if you were looking in at the Kodesh HaKodashim, you could see the 2 ceremonial doors that were open, and then there was the curtain, but it was in a doorway. We saw the artist's rendering. That's where it ends when we do the Haftorah. However, we ought to read the last pasuk Nun Aleph, which is not in the Haftorah of the second Shabbat of Chanuka, and based on everything that we've said till now, it's so obvious why. Vatishlam kol hamelacha asher asa Melech Shlomo beit Hashem. Vayavei Shlomo et kodshei David Aviv, et a kesef, et a zahav, et a kelim, natan be'otzrot beit Hashem. All of the work that was done by Shlomo Hamelech for the house of God to build it was complete. It was complete, and Shlomo brought all of that which was sanctified, that which was of his father, the silver, the gold, all of the elements, everything he put in the storehouse of the house of Hashem. In Beit Sheni, when they built the second Beit HaMikdash, where are all these things? Einenu. And it takes time to build it up. Then comes the time period of Chanukah, which of course we celebrate as an incredibly joyous time. But it came after 2.5, maybe 3 or more, not sure, but it's something around it, maybe actually probably closer to 3 years of decrees against the Jewish people. Now we're well aware about what done. We talk about it to Hanukkah. Shelley, go ahead. A question, comment.
Okay, you seem to be making too much of the halcyon days of Shlomo and all of this stuff that's David's medals that are put in the treasury. Yeah. Remember that some paro is going to come in the beginning when Rechavam is. We
didn't get there.
Which isn't going to be very long from now,
fine.
And take gold away.
Yeah, so fine.
But if God runs the world about everything, that means in some sense that God doesn't want this elaborate metal thing kind of stuff.
You're right. Shelley, product placement right now. You brought me into it. Everyone here has got to come back. You got to see what happens in the section of Rechavam. You're absolutely right. It doesn't stay. My point is, would it have been great once you're reading the Haftorah already and you're celebrating Chanukah on the second Shabbos? So Taka, why don't you read? Everything was completed. That we don't read. And actually, if you look back at the Gemara, I showed you Megillah and Lamed Alef. What's the Haftorah on the second day of Sukkot? Well, it's looking at you on this page, chapter 8, verse 1. Azia Kel Shlomo Tziknei. Yeah, he gathered the people. Yeah, it was back up top. Right? And they all came by Akilo Shlomo Hamelech Shlomo. Right? They all came. They gather. Right? The description of it. Like the next chapter is actually what gets read. Yeah. So there's something here. It's like verse 2. It starts with verse 2. By the way, is the Haftorah. And it's not verse 1. Verse 2. Vayikahalu El Hamelech Shlomo Kol Ish Yisrael B'Yerach Eitinim B'Chag B'Chodesh Shvi. It was the holiday of Sukkot. It was the time of Sukkot. That's described, and that's what we read. The second day of Sukkot. What do we read on the second Chanukah Shabbos? Menorot Shlomo. But okay, that's only when it comes up. And if it doesn't come up, which is oftentimes doesn't come up, skip, because there's something there that's kind of missing. Now, if you look at the Gemara Menachot and Chaf Cherem Bet, we find the following description of the second temple period. First of all, for anyone who's doing a house renovation or a shul renovation, you have to be a little bit careful. You're not allowed to build an exact replica of the sanctuary of the Beit HaMikdash in your own home. You can't make that the layout. At some point in the Middle Ages, there was some fascination, without getting into details, and I don't want to say too much about it. There was a fascination in Europe with trying to build structures, and in one case, possibly the city of London, in some way that was reminiscent of some aspects of the Heichal, of the Beit HaMikdash. I don't want to say more about it. I want to focus this on Judaism and not other religions or peoples or times. That story about London has a lot to do with Kabbalah with a Q that was being studied, believe it or not, in certain times in Middle Ages by non-Jews. That's not for now. But what does the Gemara say here? Lo yase adam bayit tavnid heichal. Achsadra keneged ulam. Chatzer keneged azara. Shulcha keneged shulcha. Menorah keneged menorah. You're not allowed to make any exact replicas for yourself in the ways, exactly the way it was made in the Beit HaMikdash. It's halacha. Aval osehu shel chamisha v'shel shisha v'shel shmona. But you know what you could do, the Gemara says? You could make a menorah if it has 5 branches, 6 branches, or even 8 branches. We all know what that is. Don't make it out of 7, even from other kinds of metals. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af shel eitz lo ya'aseh. Don't make the menorah out of wood. And Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says, you know why you should make it out of wood? Because actually that was Kederach Sha'asu Malchei Beit Chashmonai. That's actually the way they made the menorah by the house of the Chashmonaim. Amrulo, out of wood. Misham Raya, is that really a proof? Shpudim, that's not a good proof. They only did that because they were stuck. Shpudim shel bar zahayu v'chipum beva'atz. They actually had their iron spears, the iron staves. That's what they used to make a menorah. Where was the golden menorah? They used iron. They put it together and they covered it with ba'atz, with tin. The ba'atz, some of the commentators point out, ba'atz, when the tin tarnishes, it becomes like, as it gets older, it starts to look like wood. Hence, don't make it out of 8s. And I assume that ba'atz etymologically is related to 8s in as much as it's called tin, but it's so dull that eventually it looks like wood from afar. When they became more wealthy, they made them out of silver. Then they made it out of gold. At least according to this report, this version of it, which again, I'm not considering to say the halacha psuka, and it's impossible there was any other way, but this version of events says that the Maccabees break into the Makom HaMikdash. There is no menorah they can use. It's tameh, and they can't use it, and they don't have the money to make a new one. They don't have time to melt it down. So what do? Everybody gives in their spears. They tie them together somehow. They melt it together very quickly. They bring the soldering iron, whatever it is, being anachronistic, obviously, they put it together and they do that. Says Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, that's what was going on in the Second Temple period. All of these things line up in such a way that you're going to get up in shul and the first thing you're going to celebrate is, you know what Hanukkah is? It's the same thing as the Makom HaMikdash for the first time. You're only highlighting more and more how far the Second Temple was from the First Temple. So therefore, it's not appropriate to accentuate the celebration as against the backdrop of Beit Rishon. So we leave it out. Now, how come it gets in at all? So that's a question. How come it gets in at all? Maybe we should have found something else to put in. Maybe you could have read something else as maybe the Haftorah, the second go around should have been the same Haftorah, but it's not. Someone had their hand. You wanted to speak. Go ahead.
Helen is
Helen,
about
hi.
to speak, if I may.
Please, by all means. Good morning.
Okay. I think we have a bias against gold. We use it for jewelry. But if you go to Chemistry 101, they talk about different metals. And they talk about malleability and ductility. And if you are a metallurgist, you will realize copper is for pipes, gold is malleable and ductile. So instead of looking as gaudiness, we may look at it as a very useful metal as far as its malleability.
Fine.
And have a completely different look at it.
Sure, absolutely. But what I thought you were going to say is not that because it's associated with opulence or excess, but because for us as Jews, it's associated with the Cheta Egel, which is its own question. You probably have to get back to at some point. But yeah, you're right. And by the by, the point here is the dedication of these precious metals in the service of Hashem, at least for now, was welcome. Not
one other thing.
Proof. Yeah, please.
What about the gold of the Egel and the gold from the Egyptians? Was any of that left or stored?
The gold from the Egel, definitely not. The gold taken from the Egyptians, I mean, clearly they had more than what they gave in for the Egel, because in the Torah, in Parshat Vayakel, they actually do give gold. So they still had gold. Did they keep it and then have it all the way till then? I simply don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. But thanks for for raising you, get the juices flowing. It's good. Shelley, go ahead. You want to say something else?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you still had the hand up. Okay. Look at Divrei Hayamim. Go back to Divrei Hayamim again. We're doing it. Why I'm flipping so much? I want you to see, there's a book here, there's a book there. It's talking about the same time period, but it's giving us other information that we might not have had. I'm in the book of Divrei Hayamim Bet. Go to chapter 4. Yeah, chapter 4, verse 6. We already learned this in Melachim Alef, but I said it very quickly. I'm just going to mute you, Helen, because it's a lot of background noise, distortion. So I just muted you, but by all means, unmute if you need to speak again, if you want to speak again. Verse 6. I'm on page 988 in the Koren Tanakh Hebrew English. If you're looking online or another Tanakh, Chronicles 2, chapter 4, verse 6. Vayas kiorim asra, vaytin chamisham yamin, chamisham mismol, l'rachza bahem, and maseh ha'ola yadi chuvam, vayam l'rachza l'kohanim bo. There's 10 lavers. 10. That was already Melachim Alef. It said that. There were 10 lavers. And 5 to the right, 5 to the left. What is that about? But we'll get to that. Verse 7. Pasuk Zayin. Vayas et menorot hazahav eser kemishpatam. He made the 10 menorahs according to their statutes, according to their specs, according to whatever's supposed to be doing, how it was supposed to be made. 5 to the right, 5 to the left. And verse 8, which we do not have in Sefer Melachim Aleph, very mysterious. Vayas shulchanot asara, vayanach behechal, chamisham yamin, chamisham mismol, vayas mizrakei zahav meya. And then there are all these different basins that came along. There are 100 of those. So there's 10 lavers, 10 kiorim, 10 menorahs, 10 shulchanot. In Melachim Aleph, it mentioned the 10 lavers and the 10 menorahs. It didn't mention the 10 shulchanot, which is also a big mystery. Why didn't you mention it there? So if you look with me at the Gemara here in front of us, you see the following. The Gemara Masechet Menachot, also same area of the Gemara, just much later on in the Masechet and Daf Tzadi Chet Amud Bet, tells us the following. Tanu Rabbanan, Asara Shulchanot Asa Shlomo Hamelech. He made 10 tables. These are the golden tables. Shenamar has to quote from Divrei Hayamim. Ve'ashulchanot Asara vayanach behechal chamisham yamin v'chamisham mismol. V'im tomar, if you'll say that it's chamisham yamin apetach v'chamisham mismol apetach, you want to tell me 5 on one side of the door and 5 on the other side of the door? That's not going to work. Im kain matzina shulchan bedarim v'torah amra v'shulchan titen al tzelat tzafon. The shulchan has to be on the north side. On the north side. So Just imagine in your mind's eye, you're standing at the doorway looking into the sanctuary of the temple. If you're standing outside looking in, which unless you are a Kohen, a male Kohen, you could not really do unless you had really great eyesight and a telescope or something to see with such great detail and to be able to see inside, but okay. But if you were standing there, you would be able to see to the right of you, which is to say off to the north side, the 10 shulchanot, but they can't be on both sides, to the right and to the left. They're only on the right-hand side, which is the north side. So how then do we get to 10? And it's 5 and 5, 5 to the right, 5 to the left. What does that mean? Ela shel Moshe ba'emtza, chamisha mimino v'chamisha bismolo. The one that was of Moshe Rabbeinu's time, the shulchan from Moshe Rabbeinu's time, is in the middle, and it has 5 to the right of it and 5 to the left of it. All 10 plus 1, it's really 11, 10 plus 1 are on the north side of the Beit HaMikdash, in the sanctuary of Beit HaMikdash. Therefore, if a person was standing in the doorway looking in to the right, which is that's the north, is to the right, because the temple ran on an east-west axis. So you'd be standing in the east looking to the west. And if you looked off to your right, you would see this array of 11 shulchanot. Again, the shulchan of Moshe in the middle, and then 5 on either side, coming out on either side. A big discussion of the Gemara we will not get into today. What do you mean by 5 on either side? What do you mean by in the middle? What's the axis of orientation, east-west or north-south of these shulchanot, etc.? I just don't want to go there because it takes us too far afield. It's very technical. It's very interesting, but it's too technical for today. I got to keep us about the menorah, because the next thing it says is same thing with regard to menorahs. Shlomo, again, quoting from the Real, made the menorot, and it mentions, right? He made them, here it's quoted Kamishpat, I think it's Kamishpatam when we looked it up, and he put it in the Heichal, again, 5 to the right, 5 to the left. You think it means on either side of the door? Then we would find the menorah is to the north. But the Torah specifically says, the menorah has to be facing the shulchan. The shulchan is in the north, then the menorah must be in the south, says the Gemara. So the menorah always has to be facing. Wherever you put the shulchan, the menorah has to face it. Again, does that mean that, and the big discussion here in the Gemara, how did the menorah face? Was the menorah on a north-south axis? So if you were looking in, you could see the outline in front of you of the doorway of the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodashim. On the one side, you saw the shulchan of Moshe, and the other side, the menorah of Moshe. And both of them are facing you because they are on a north-south axis. Right? And then the other 5 are 5 and 5 apiece, sort of like a U shape, right? Picture a letter U, a letter chet. So the top of the letter chet, or the letter U, that's where the Moshe one was each time. And then it extended 5 out, or maybe another possibility, maybe the menorah was on an east-west axis. So if you were looking in, you wouldn't really see the face of the menorah or the face of the shulchan. You would be looking at it from like an angle, seeing it on the side, and behind it, stretching out on either side of the east-west axis, 5 and 5 apiece. And that the menorah of Moshe and the shulchan of Moshe are facing each other, north and south, right and left. And then what you see behind they're all facing each other, but they're set back. Big discussion of the Gemara. Guess what? Not resolved. And how are we going to know? We just don't know. We don't know which way it went. Now, when we look at this array, we should have already asked ourselves, I'm surprised nobody raised their hand yet, but I know you're thinking it. Wait. The Torah tells us how to build the Mishkan. I understood when the Mikdash was built, apparently Shlomo Hamelech took the dimensions of the Mishkan and he extended them. The Mishkan was 30 amot by 10 amot was the floor space, and 10 amot high. What did Shlomo Hamelech do? It says in Sefer Melachim, he made it 60 by 20 by 20. He just extended it. I understand, with the thumb from the base matters, I understand if you want to add to the dimensions, maybe he had a tradition, he could do that. But now you're telling me he actually multiplied the discrete number, the specific number of elements in the Mikdash? On who says so? Easy answer, that was part of the blueprint, clearly. And you have a little hint to that because it mentions Kimishpatam with regard to the menorahs. The Shulchan is not mentioned at all in Sefer Melachim. That's a mystery. But the 10 are already mentioned in Sefer Melachim. He built 10 menorot. It sounds like you could almost say that it was necessary to build those 10. So the question is, and you look it up in the Torah, in Sefer Shmot, in Parshat Truma. If you turn there with me for a minute to chapter 25, Parshat Truma, chapter 25, Sefer Shmot. We find page 92 in the Koren Tanakh. It's going through each thing that needs to be made. Again, Exodus is Shmot, chapter 25, verse 10. That's the paragraph with the Aron. Verse 23, the section about the Shulchan. Verse 31, the section about the menorah. Right? Look at how it talks about the Aron, and verse 10. V'asu Aron etzei shitim, etc. in the dimensions. Chav Gimel, v'asita shulchan etzei shitim, the dimensions. Verse 31, v'asita menorah zahav tahor. And before you get to the dimensions, we get to the appearance. Miksha te'aseh hamenorah yirecha v'kana v'geviyah kaftorah ufracha mimena yu. And then it keeps going. It tells you it's the 6 branches with the stem in the middle, right? So from here, some of the Rishonim wanted to tease out that maybe there's a hint right here to the fact that in the future there would not be 1, but it would be tenfold. If you look with me on the screen, the Dad Zakeni Ba'al Tosfot, Te'aseh HaMenorah. I mean, this is like, really? But if you didn't know this, if you hadn't read Sefer Melachim, you wouldn't find it. But they had either the Masorah. Here's a good example. Did they make this up? Did they find it? I don't have this in Midrash, one from Chazal. Male Yud. It's the only time that the word Ta'aseh or Te'aseh actually includes the baby letter, Yud. So once it included an extra letter, Remez La'aseh Menorot She'ati Shlomo La'asot. It's a hint to the 10 Menorot that Shlomo was going to make. What does this tell you? Obviously, number 1, obviously the Ba'al Tosfot must have had an amazing Masorah. It doesn't appear anywhere in that I'm aware of in the world of Chazal, but here the dots that came already in the Middle Ages, they got it. Number 2, which doesn't contradict number 1, they were bothered. How did Shlomo come up with tenfold? And maybe they weren't happy enough to say, well, it was the model from before. When you talk about dimensions, so he made the dimension with the same dimensions, he kept the proportions, he just added it. It came along the menorahs. Let me make 10. I like it better. Who are you? You can't just, did you make 10 aronot? No. So why the menorah? Oh, there's an extra letter yud. Rabbeinu Bechai along the same lines. V'chein b'menorah k'tiv, te'aseh ha'menorah b'yud, v'lachein aseh Shlomo eser menorot. Now this one is maybe, and therefore, and therefore, doesn't mean Shlomo himself was reading Tanakh very carefully and he found the yud and he darshaned it. Could be. She'ena kavana shetetzaveh haTorah menorah achat she'yavo Shlomo v'yaseh mehem eser. It can't be that the Torah commands you make 1, and then Shlomo comes and says, I want to make 10. V'chein asar shulchanot v'asar kiorim v'nimtza over al Bal Tosif. Some of us on the shir today, it's like all the worlds are clashing. It's like from the whole sugya of Bal Tosif from Masachet Sukkah that we spent so much time on in depth. So it's Bal Tosif. You can't add elements. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu modia l'Moshe. Shem's already telling Moshe, Bahar, already up on the mountain. Ki yibanu Beit Mikdash yasu asara, they should make 10. V'hayu advarim kabbalah b'yadam ad shegiya bina Beit Mikdash v'asa Shlomo kasher hayta kabbalah b'yadam. It's part of the received tradition. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to have to see that in the future, when the Mikdash is built, I want you to build 10 menorot. Okay, well, does it answer about the Shulchanot and the Kiorot? No, but it at least tells something that menorot, and we'll run with that. V'od says the Ben Bechai, who's very into the world of Remez in general, there's a Remez Mispar Asara, there's Shiva Kanim, 7 branches, the Kaftor Ugvia V'ferach Harei Asara. If you add it all up, that's 10. 7 branches, and then it mentions the Kaftor, the Gevia, and the Ferach, and when it mentions them, it says that it has a knob or button, a cup, a flower. Now it turns out there are actually more, but he says, well, if you just look at that, that's 10. Okay, beautiful idea, I think. Needs my approbation, but obviously they're struggling. okay, Baltosiv, you can't decide. No, he found a hint. He darshaned the letter Yud, and from the letter, according to Baruch at least, he darshaned it, and there was a Kabbalah from all the generations that Hashem told Moshe, you see this extra letter there? I didn't put it for the other elements. That's why I put it here, because in the future it's going to be 10. The Gemara then has a debate further along, the same sugya. The Gemara debates the following. Asara Shulchan Rasa Shlomo made 10. V'lo hayu misadrin ela al Shlomo, but they only put Shel Moshe, excuse me. They only put the 10 showbreads on the table of Moshe. The other 10 was ornamental. It was there for design. Shenemar v'rashulchan asher alav lechem apanim hazahav. Right. So there was a shulchan. They didn't do it for all of them. The other they were there. They should look beautiful. Menorot Shlomo, the only one they ever lit is the one of Moshe. The other 10 were there for beauty's sake. Okay, because it said Menorot Zahav, 1. Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel disagrees. Al kulam hayu misadrin. No, actually, they did put the showbreads on all 11 in total. And they lit all 11 menorahs every single day. And he quotes a pasuk also to prove that this is the case. So a machloket as to what this is doing, is it strictly for design or is it actually functional in nature? Which is amazing to consider there could have been a machloket about such a thing. Okay. The Radak in Melachim Alef, he paskins, if you could say such a thing, 5 to the right, 5 to the left. So he explains how it was arrayed. And of course, all the menorahs had to be on the south, all the shulchan had to be in the north. And in Divrei Yamim, it describes how it goes, that they would put down the showbread, etc. So he thinks that they would actually put the showbreads on all, and they would light all of the menorahs, even though there's a machloket in the words of Chazal, Hanirim in a poskim, kainhu. It seems from the poskim that it really was, they lit all of them. Even though the Tanakama, who's the unnamed earliest source, is followed up by a dat yachid by Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, the Radak thinks that really they did everything. Okay? Choliot. The last thing I want to see today is to try to put some of this together and to understand something about these 10 Menorot a little bit on a deeper level about what its function was. If you look up in Shmot chapter 27, that's the end of the chapter, the tail end, which again, the chapter numbers don't mean anything to us. The beginning of Parshat Tetzaveh, we learn here about Vatat Bnei Yisrael. It's page 95 of the Koren Tanakh. Again, Shmot chapter 27, verse 20. Right? And 21. Vatat Bnei Yisrael v'koil Hashem zayit zach katit lamaor la'alot ner tamid be'ol moed michutz l'paroch l'asher al ha'idut yarochoto Aaron v'anav mi'erev ad boker lifnei Hashem chukat l'medorotam me'et bnei Yisrael. It tells you should command them to take this pure olive oil that they're going to put as an everlasting lamp. It's going to be in the Ol Moed. It's right outside of the Parochet, right? It's where you should array it from evening to morning. It should be in front of Hashem as an everlasting edict for all generations for the Jewish people. Says the Kohen from Dvinsk. You need to pay attention to it a little bit, but I hope we'll get through this. So the first part of the Meshech Chochmah is to try to understand something about the idea about the lighting of the lights and what it signifies. Not just that it's a mitzvah, but that there's something deeper going on. It's possible, he says, Rabbi Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra, the Parsha Ba'alotcha, Shavu B'Shalom, even though they say in the Mechilta, it says in the work of Chazal, the Mechilta, called Dibrach Nidaber HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Moshe Lo Haya El B'Yom. Hashem only spoke to Moshe during the day, as it says B'Yom Diber Hashem El Moshe. Nonetheless, B'Chol Zeh K'Shehayu Anera Dolkim Haya Kayom V'Diber Mo B'Layla. He says, I think this might be the proof to what Ibn Ezra says, that as long as the lights were being lit and there was a menorah lit in the Mikdash, the Mishkan rather, Hashem spoke to Moshe at night as well. And that's why it says, V'ikchu Eilecha, Shem Zayit Zach, Perush L'tzorchecha, it's for your needs, personal needs, Moshe. She'adam daitu behir be'eta or, Uchemo ein ora ela simcha. Right? A person's mind is clear at the time of light, of illumination. As it says, in ora el simcha, the ora that's being referenced is that of simcha. It's a quote. We won't go into the source of that. It's a whole discussion as well. What it comes from. And the Rabbi Kuberman edition goes into a bit of an excursus to try to explain it. But all right, we don't to see the whole thing inside. It'll take a while. It's from the Elio Zuta, Tanad Elio Zuta. Okay, ulazeh. Right. So nighttime, if you have light, you have clarity. If you have clarity, you can be, and you're Moshe Rabbeinu, you can get nevuah. Ulazeh hulitzarcha chanat napash Moshe lahadibur sheyeh shor mitoch simcha. So he would be in a state of joy, and he would be and not despondency, and be able to have the Ruach HaKodesh come to him, and more than that, the nevuah, even at night. But why does it say Chukat l'medorotechem b'nei Yisrael in the same section? Verse 21 says that it's going to be for all generations an edict. Later generations, it won't have a purpose to light it. It's just a decree. That's what a chok is. Because as we learn in the Gemara Masachet Shabbat, klum sheklum l'orani tzarich v'lakol b'ayim shana l'halchel l'oro. Does God really need the light? For 40 years, they went by God's light, right? So see, look that up. Umizeh remez l'ma shekatav b'sma dikshenerot dolkim. The sma is the Sefer Me'irat Einayim, one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Shul Falk on the Choshen Mishpat. When they light lights, mutla dun balayla, you can continue a court case at night, not a capital case, but a monetary case at night if you lit lights. So you see the nighttime, the light, it's good. That's chamisha menurot, right? The commentary says here must be why he made 5. It's 5 and 5 on either side. Why was he obsessing about doing what Shlomo do that? They lit all the lights. They set up all the tables with the bread. Quotes the pasuk again. Upshuto the pshat shem madlik bekulan. It's not like Rashi said on those psukim, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So look up the Yalkut Melachim, the Al-Kulum Hayam Masader, Rak B'Shal Moshe Tchila. The Yalkut Shimoni on Sefer Melachim tells us that all of them were lit, all of the tables were set, but it was just, they'd used the Moshe one first, and then they did the other ones after. So what the Meshech Chochmah explains here is that for future generations, it was a chok that they needed to have the lights lit at night. That's what you do. That's the etiquette. But in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, it was all about Moshe Rabbeinu's what? His nevuah, being able to come at night. Therefore, but for the future, it's no more than a chok. But stay with me. Stay with me. Give me 2 more minutes to figure this out. Yaakov Shimoni writes, you know why Shlomo made 10 shulchanot? He wanted there to be a lot of bounty. The shulchan has the breads on it. The breads are made out of the produce. He wanted there to be much produce in their society. Now they don't live as they did in the desert. Why did Moshe make only 1? They didn't need any produce. They got the man. So now he needed 10. He had to recognize that for the time he was in, he had to magnify. Again, not taking away that he has some tradition, but some idea about the 10. And therefore 10 lavers. Why? Because the lavers, it's not here, it's elsewhere, describes because there'd be a lot of geshem, another version of the Yalkut Shimoni, so have a lot of rain. The laver is the water. So I want that. Vayasim menorah zahav eser keneged aseret hadibrot. The 10 is against the aseret hadibrot. V'chol menorah hayubah shiva nerot. So each menorah has 7 branches. Harishivim keneged shivim umot. The Jewish people now are an empire. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jewish people, it was internal, just the Jews. What happens now? Now it's the 70 nations that are related. And if the 70 nations are related, now we need tenfold. The 10 represent the 70 nations. And then what's the last 7 branched menorah? That's the Jewish people, separate Jewish people. But 7 times the 10 menorahs is 70 branches as against the 70 nations of the world. Anybody who remembers something about Sukkot, 70 nations, the 70 offerings of bulls, another connection. Yeah, the menorahs and menorahs are related somehow. The holiday of Sukkot, 70. Okay. As long as they were lighting these candles, the other nations were subdued. But after that, they came up. They came up again. And even though Shlomo made the 10 shulchanot, even though he made 10, he was careful to do the Moshe one first, and it went in a certain sequence, and that's what the Meshech Chochmah says. It was in the sequence, but it was done that way and for that reason. And the Menorot, same thing. Back to the Meshech Chochmah. See the rationale for the Shulchan and the Kior as well. There was already gold, already a lot of gold. Limnorot hazahav, v'neroteim zahav, mishka menorah, u'menorah v'neroteah. That's already in Divrei Yamim Aleph. We don't have time to look it up. 1 Chronicles, it says that David had a lot of gold for the purpose of the Menorot. Umisharim the Darish Shekevich Mishkan Shaya Rochav Eser Shloshim Ama Haya Menorah Achat. Since there was in the Mikdash, it's 10 by 30, and there was one menorah. Zinkena Kol HaCheshbon Hu Eser Pamim Shloshim Hu Shlosh Mea Ama Komato Eser Mal V'I Cheshbon Echal Shaban Shlomo Haya Shishim Arochav Esrim Imkein Esrim Pamim Shishim Hu Alef U'Shnei Me'ot V'Komato Shloshim Imkein Hu Gimel Pamim Kacha, right? Hu Shlosh Talafim V'Shesh Me'ot. What did I just say in a very, very speedy way? Just do the math, he says. When you do the math, you notice the dimensions, right? It's several fold. It's a 10-fold plus. So he says, well, the truth is it doesn't work out exactly, because really it should have been 11 menorahs in addition to Moshe's menorah and the 10 menorot, 5 on one side, 5 on the other. Okay, so if you do the math, the truth is he says it really should have been, based on the ratio, should have been even another menorah, but he couldn't make more because they could no longer fit. That was the maximum you could get to. So for a bigger hall, you needed more light. It's interesting. That's the Meshech Chochmah wants to argue. Ubifrat lePerush Rashi shadvrei agova esrim imkein lo hayarak mea ama yoter. It's only mea ama more. Again, this has to do with the dimensions of the Mikdash. But here he explains why the menorah is the focus and the shulchan is the appurtenance that comes after. You know why? We learned previously in the Gemara, the shulchan has to face the menorah. So if you make an extra menorah, you need an extra shulchan to face it. V'kazu kein zeh. And therefore, if you make the one, you have to make the other. And that's why, if you look also in Divrei Hayamim Bet, that's why it describes it as the idea of Divrei Hayamim Bet in chapter, whatever it was, chapter 4 over there. If you look up the sequence, you have the menorahs in verse 7, and the shulchanot in verse 8. Menorahs first and shulchanot after. Should have been shulchan before the menorah. Look in the Torah. It's Aaron, shulchan, menorah. Why is it reversed? Because the Meshech Chochmah says the focus here is davka on the menorah. And therefore, they also had to make the shulchanot 10 to match the menorahs. You can't have a menorah without a shulchan. Ki ha-shulchan tzarich liot nocha menorah b'kazu kein zeh. Has to equal up. Now look at the last line here. V'zeh rak b'mikdash Shlomo she'agilui shechina. This was only possible to be done, the 10 menorahs, in the time of Shlomo. Why? Because there was divine revelation. Right? Go look it up. Because actually it was an edict by the time we got to the time of the second Beit HaMikdash, because there was no longer any Gilui Shechina. And of course, that's what we learned. Did he need he needed the light? 40 years the Jewish people were in the Midbar, and they only went by Hashem's light. Rather, the existence of the menorah is an Edut Hili by Olam, Shechina Shor B'Yisrael, the nations of the world, everyone should know, the divine presence dwells with the Jewish people. And that's what our Chanukah is. But it's not 10. It's only 1. Now, when we look in the Gemara here in Rosh Hashanah, I have 2 more sources here today. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells us that there were 50 gates of understanding, and they were all given to Moshe except for 1. You got 49. And then it mentions about Shlomo, that Shlomo wanted to be exactly like Moshe. So what did the Bat Kol come out and say to him? It told him, you're not going to make it, right? So, and there's never going to be a prophet like Moshe. So one of the opinions here with Rav and Shmuel says, well, there was never someone so great among the Nevi'im, but there was someone so great among the kings. So in the first one, Rav and Shmuel of Machloket, Kohelet wanted to be like Moshe, and Shem told him no. In the second one, Shem told him, well, you won't be as great a Navi, but among the kings, you will be known as the greatest. Shlomo and Moshe, 2 people with a relationship across the generations, the only 2 people who build a mikdash at a time of Gilui Shechina and with Nevi'im. And in the case of Moshe, he is the Navi. But we find that Shlomo might not have really reached all the way up to where he thought he was going to get to. He might have actually reached high and maybe not made it all the way to as far as he had hoped he would get in his own lifetime, because maybe there was an element of, I would say, a touch, not more than a touch, but a touch of overreach on his part in terms of what he sought to do. I'll show you this last source. It's for your consideration, but it also kind of explains to us a little bit maybe why it doesn't belong so much on the holiday of Hanukkah. It belongs more the story of these menorot for the time of a Shlomo and not the time of a Moshe Rabbeinu. It's worthy of consideration, and we consider the story of Hanukkah and what ended up happening in the end of Hanukkah. Maybe it's related as well, something about a little bit of maybe some overreach. So that's the last source I have to show you today. And this is from the beginning of Parshat Va'era, actually, but it describes something about Shlomo and Moshe here as well. Upaniteni lirot chochma v'holilut v'sichlut k'ma adam she'yavo acharei Hamelech asher kva asuhu. I went to go see wisdom and vanity and folly for what is a person that will come after the king, that which has already been done. This pasuk was said about Shlomo and about Moshe. How is it about Shlomo? When Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people, he gave a mitzvah aseh, mitzvah lo ta'aseh, and he gave the king special mitzvahs: not to have too many horses, not to have too much wealth, not to have too many wives, that his heart should not stray. So Amad Shlomo Hamelech v'hichkim al gzirato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was smarter than that. He tried to outsmart the decree of Hashem, and he said, "Lama Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo yarbe lo nashim." Why did he say that there shouldn't be with the letter Yud? Why did he say that? Lo bishvil shelo yasur levavo. Isn't it because he was worried that the heart of the king would stray on account of that? Ani arbe v'libi lo yasur. I will have many more, and you know what? My heart will not stray. Amar Rabotenu, our sages teach that exactly that hour, Alta Yud should be Yirbe, right, or Yarbe rather. The little letter Yud, the baby letter, went to bow down before Hashem. And it said, Ribon ha'olamim, master of the universe, of the worlds. Lo kach Marta, ein ot betel min haTorah la'olam. No letter will ever be canceled in the world. Hare Shlomo made mevateloti. Look how Shlomo cancels me out. V'shema yom yivatel achat. He'll cancel one letter and then another and another. The whole Torah will be canceled, chas v'shalom. It'll be canceled and nullified, right? The cancel culture, right? Chalila. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shlomo ve'elef ki yotzebo, lo yu b'tein v'kotzer mimcha eni mevatel. I won't take a single letter, not a little piece of you, to nullify at any point. And 1,000 Shlomos should be nullified before you will be. Remember what we talked about before with the little letter Yud? Shlomo knew about darshan letter Yuds. Maybe he had that tradition. And Teyaseh on the menorah. The menorah represents wisdom and represents the moment of grandeur for Klal Yisrael. Is one that exists when the Shechina is Shoreh. At the time of Bayit Sheni, so they didn't have an Aron Kodesh already. There were so many things they didn't have. And even according to some accounts, look how they had to build a menorah for the holiday of Chanukah. Nonetheless, it's a great celebration. The holiday of Chanukah is not the same thing as the Chanukah Mikdash of Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, entirely, the days of Shlomo. It's not actually a restoration of that, but it's something on the road. And those of us who feel that we're part of a journey of Jewish history can hopefully grab hold of Chanukah and hold it up and celebrate it, and to look at the lights, not to use them, but just to look at them, lir otam bilvad, and to see in them a certain historical process. The Nevuah of Zechariah, that's what happens in the time period of Chanukah. Does it last? In the end, the house of Chashmonai, unfortunately, also didn't work out. But as the Rambam writes and others write, but we did have a celebration. We did have some independence, 200 years, and that was worthy of making a holiday. And that's the Chachamim made for us. And the Shabbos is when there's times when the second Shabbos Chanukah, so then we can read about Shlomo Melech. But otherwise, we're not on that madrega. The madrega of the 10 menorot of Shlomo Melech, of the great Chachma, of that, we're left with one menorah, but yet it is a precious one still. And the Chanukiyot in our homes remind us also of the menorah in the Makom HaMikdash, of the 8 days that come after the 7 days as such. I wish everyone a Chanukah Sameach, and I appreciate everyone coming today. And yeah, please, I want to let people go, but if you
One
want to
more
stick
in-
around, you're welcome to do so.